Afternoon. Thank you for joining me here today. First of all, I want to offer my sincere condolences on behalf of all Manitobans to the many families and friends who've lost a loved one to COVID this past weekend and week, and to the thousands of Manitobans who are battling this virus right now. Our thoughts and prayers go out to you. They go out to your family. This is an unprecedented time, and it is not an easy time. And all the more important, therefore, that we pull together and that we battle this thing together. This year has been like no other. COVID-19 has handed us new challenges, to put it mildly, and even greater challenges than before. COVID nous a lancé de nouveaux défis et des défis encore plus grands qu'auparavant. This virus has challenged each of us to become more resilient, more innovative, more determined than we ever thought necessary, and I have seen those qualities emerge in Manitobans in these last few months in spades. Our government's number one priority in the face of this pandemic has been protecting our most vulnerable citizens and ensuring our healthcare system's there for all Manitobans when they need it. And the current surge of COVID-19 cases is obviously very, very concerning. It's happening across, yes, it's happening around the world. Yes, it's happening across Canada. Yes, half a dozen provinces have seen record highs in the last few days. But the fact is our concerns are focused on working cooperatively with other jurisdictions, but they are focused on protecting Manitobans and people throughout Winnipeg and rural Manitoba who are facing this challenge. And that's why, under the direction of Dr. Roussin and our healthcare leaders, all of Manitoba is now in the critical red level on the pandemic response system, and this is to help us get back on the right track and halt the spread of this deadly virus. The new public health measures that were announced last Tuesday and came into effect last Thursday can only work with the cooperation and the commitment of all Manitobans to make them work. We are only as strong as our weakest link, and so I say to all Manitobans, be sure you are not our weakest link. When we were abiding by the fundamentals, we were beating COVID. Then some of us lost our way, and now COVID's beating us. And we need to get back to the fundamentals, and we need to flatten our COVID curve, and we need to do it now. And I believe with the cooperation and assistance of all Manitobans, we can, and we will get back to beating COVID. We've all been impacted by COVID-19, some more than others. And we recognize the significant personal and professional sacrifices that all Manitobans have made in the face of this pandemic in order to protect themselves, in order to protect their loved ones, in order to help protect their community too. So to our local businesses, I want to say, you are the backbone of our economy. And we know you've had to deal with some rough consequences with COVID. You've had to close your doors, some of you. You've had to lay off staff. You've had to adapt your operations, and thank you for doing that, to protect your customers and your staff. And you've had to rehire staff back, and then with the recent restrictions, some of you have had to lay people off, and I know how that hurts. I've been there. It's not easy. And I thank you, and I thank you for putting capital on the line, for putting your lives on the line financially for the services and the goods you provide to the rest of us. So thank you to you for being on Team Manitoba. Because of your efforts and because of your dedication, I believe Team Manitoba is stronger and more resilient. And so today, I want to emphasize how we have been working with and we're going to continue to work with, side by side, our Manitoba businesses and help them do what they do best. Employ Manitobans, offer services Manitobans need, offer goods that Manitobans want. But we know they can't do that now because of these restrictions. Our code red makes that impossible for some and much more difficult for others. And that's why we are offering the Manitoba Bridge Grant. This is $5,000 in direct support to any Manitoba. This is not a loan. This is direct support, non-repayable. I should be clear about that. To any Manitoba business, and also I should mention, if you're a nonprofit, a community organization, for example, if you're a charity that's been impacted by this, a church group, If you've been forced to close as a result of the COVID-19 public health order that came into effect last week, November 12th, this program is for you. This new program is now live, and I encourage thousands of impacted businesses in Manitoba to apply, and to apply right now. There's a broad range of eligible businesses, as you know, because there's a broad range of restrictions and closures as a consequence of our necessary decisions to protect our citizens from this COVID epidemic. Eligible businesses include non-essential retailers, restaurants, bars, beverage rooms, brew pubs, microbreweries, distilleries, recreation and sports facilities, museums and galleries, theaters and concert halls, and I mentioned earlier not-for-profits, faith-based organizations, and registered charities as well. Eligible applicants will receive a one-time $5,000 payment automatically deposited within days after their application is approved. I should also mention that the application deadline for this program is December 15th, 2020, so you have a little less than a month to get that application in. And I assure you the red tape is minimal. Should these public health orders remain in place past January 1st, 2021, the Manitoba Bridge Grant will be extended to provide an additional $5,000 to eligible organizations. Thus far, we've committed at least $250 million to protect Manitoba businesses at this critical time in our fight against COVID-19. For a full list of criteria and to apply, I am encouraging you to go to manitoba.ca/COVID-19 and click on Programs, and then click on Manitoba Bridge Grant, and you'll get the detail you need. If you need assistance to complete the online form, applicants can contact our Manitoba Government Inquiry number. It's 204-945-3744, or toll-free at 1-866-Manitoba. I want to stress now, too, that businesses that received other federal or provincial funding, such as our Gaap program that we offered earlier in the year, that actually 10,000 Manitoba businesses received, that even though you received that previous grant, you are eligible for this program as well. So don't think that you're not. You are. And I want to encourage you to apply for the additional financial support that you may well need. I should mention that Gaap program that we launched was very, very successful in terms of numbers of businesses who gave us their applications and their feedback and thanks. That was about $60 million of direct financial assistance, and as you know, I announced last week, we've converted that from a conditional program to unconditional. In other words, when we first launched it, we didn't want to double up on other federal programs. We wanted the money to be focused on those who couldn't receive a federal program. So we made it a repayable loan for those who were able to go and get more money from the federal programs. We've changed that now, and so our program will be a grant, again, not repayable, and this actually adds tens of millions of dollars to the coffers of our small businesses in the province that they now know they don't have to repay. I also mentioned last week, but it bears repeating, that on our wage subsidy program, that was over 1,800 businesses used that program. That was a matching program, provided up to $5,000 per employee for a maximum total of 20 employees, which could have meant for eligible businesses about $100,000 in supports. We're going to be sending advance payments on that. Forget about the red tape requirements there, because we know many of you have the need for the money now. And whereas before you would have had to wait till the end of the application period and then submit the paperwork and la-di-da, this way you'll get $1,500 by next week for every eligible worker that you hired or rehired to date. So that's going to put about $15 million out over the next 2 or 3 days, I think. That's what I'm told. So that's money that'll be coming to you folks as well. So that program, plus this bridge program, plus the Gaap program, we're doing our best to give you support. This is, I know, not going to change the lives of multinational businesses, but for smaller Manitoba businesses, Our sincere hope is that this is a good deal for you and it's going to help you. It will never make up for your losses or your costs through this horrible time. I understand that. But as a former small business person, I can tell you there are times when a little bit of cash would come in handy, and I hope it comes in handy for you now. We're advancing this support now. We feel it's the right way to go about doing it. We've modified our programs based on the advice we've received from our many business groups who've provided us generously with advice over the last number of weeks and months. I'll just close by saying the idea here is to bridge you through. It's not to help you make money while not working, and I don't think that's what any of us want. We know that job one is to get after COVID, get COVID under control, and in that way allow you to get back to doing what you want to do, which is running your small businesses, serving people, helping people. It's a bridge, and it's a bridge we need, and we hope that you'll be able to avail yourself of it by applying as I described earlier. The next few weeks isn't going to be easy. It isn't going to be easy because COVID is tough. It's resilient, but it's not as resilient as Manitobans. And we can beat this thing, and we can do it if we stay together, and if we're disciplined, and if we persevere. And that's what we have to do now. Best thing we can do for our small businesses, I've talked about them a lot today, but it's also good for our healthcare system to not have our frontline workers overburdened, to not have the burden we put on those people. For our schools, for our teachers who are working so hard to adapt and accommodate the stresses that go with this miserable condition called COVID. For our communities, for our loved ones, for our families, for our friends. Bend the COVID curve. We did it once, and we can do it again, too. It's a team effort, and we all have a role to play in protecting ourselves and our loved ones in our community. When we were abiding by the fundamentals, when we were listening and applying the certain knowledge of how to beat COVID, we were beating COVID. Then some of us lost our way, and now COVID's beating us. And I don't think there's any Manitoban out there who wouldn't like to get back to beating COVID again, so let's do it. Lorsque nous respections les fondamentaux, nous battions COVID. Alors certains d'entre nous ont perdu notre chemin. Et maintenant, COVID nous bat. Nous devons revenir aux fondamentaux et piller notre cœur COVID maintenant. It's crucial we follow the fundamentals. Stay home. Only leave your home for essential purposes. Stay home when you're sick. Stay home and make sure you stay home if any member of your family is sick as well. Wash your hands. Cover your cough. Practice physical distancing. Wear a mask. And do your best to limit your close contacts by 75%. Thank you. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. A reminder to our reporters on the line, you will have one preliminary and one follow-up question. Up first this afternoon from City News, Stephanie.
Mr. Premier, Stephanie Lasuk from City News. We saw lots of Manitobans out shopping this weekend, and we heard earlier from Dr. Rusin that some big box stores are trying to get around the restrictions by offering small amounts of essential goods. I wanted to get your reaction to this and ask if you are going to consider kind of revising the public health order.
Yes, and I'm very concerned about that. I think it's dangerous practice and unfair. I think it's also important to understand that I'll give you a detailed report, Stephanie, tomorrow on our oversight and on the enforcement of rules. It's important to understand that many Manitobans have been really helpful in letting us know about these situations, and I thank them for that. But there are other steps, I think, that may need to be taken as a result of some of the unfortunate decisions that have been made by some over the last while.
Okay, and is the province looking to beef up enforcement by hiring security guards and training them? Is that something that's part of the effort right now?
I'll have more to say on that tomorrow, Stephanie. I can only say I think that deterrents matter. I mean, ask yourself if there were no traffic rules and we knew there were no police out there enforcing them, would the roads be safer? And I think the obvious answer is, of course not. Some people would take advantage of that, and some people take advantage when they think they can of the situation we're in now. And that's sad, but it's a reality. So that's why we've made real efforts to beef up our enforcement. And I'll give you more detail on that tomorrow.
From the Winnipeg Free Press, Larry.
Premier, just following up on the enforcement of rules, are you disappointed that so few tickets were issued at the Steinbach anti-mask rally over the weekend? And what message did that send to the people who participated in that rally?
Larry, I can only tell you that there's more to come from that. I can give you a little more info tomorrow. And I will say, of course, on the surface of it, when you see that many people out doing something wrong, you want to see the tickets issued right then. I would say in defense of the folks that were out there doing their job, trying to help regulate and enforce, that it was a pretty dangerous situation. And unfortunately, there were threats, and there was some things said that people, I think, would, if they thought about it and prayed on it after, they would be very regretful that they did some things and said some things they shouldn't have done. That being said, I'll have more to tell you on that tomorrow. There's more to come than just that ticket.
My follow-up question, we're hearing that the convention center is being planned as one of the hospital overflow spaces. What makes that a good location?
Well, I think Reg Helwer has been doing a lot of work. His department's been doing a lot of work, Larry, on getting not just facilities, but supplies and things. And I think there's a report coming on that later this week, early next, an update. It's not just about facility capacity, it's about other machinery and equipment that we're looking at or in the process of getting. So, you know, it's important to prepare. Unfortunately, we have to prepare for the worst, and believe it or not, it could get worse, and we have to consider the reality of that. So that's what our planning has been focused on, not just today, but also tomorrow. A lot of that planning began much earlier in the year. A lot of what you're seeing now, things like the shortening waits for getting tests, a higher number of tests. I give you these as examples. There are many others, are the result of forward planning that our Brent Roussin, our medical leaders, have engaged in, along with our elected officials over the last number of months. But again, we have to continue to prepare for other eventualities as well. Much of this, of course, hinges on compliance, as you well know, and that is what we have to continue to be diligent about. All of us have to work together. We're only as strong as our weakest link. Don't be the weakest link, is my advice to people.
From Global, Kevin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Premier. If these case numbers in Manitoba don't go down very soon, what kind of restrictions are we looking at next? You talked about a curfew a week or two ago. Is that on the table still? If that's not on the table, what's the next step if these case numbers stay high?
It has to be on the table. We have to be diligent, and our enforcement is stepping up. Our restrictions, the earlier restrictions, really are just beginning to see impact. The tougher restrictions, we strengthened our rules, as you know, last Thursday. That'll take a couple of weeks. This is what Dr. Roussin tells us, to show positive change. But further restrictions have to be on the table. And if we see more events like that Steinbach event, that's going to open the door to more COVID cases, and that has to open the door to more stringent actions.
Okay, and my follow-up, for the last month and a half, you guys have slowly brought in restrictions, and we're still seeing these numbers high. Many Manitobans, or some Manitobans at the very least, that kind of signifies, I would think, that they've maybe tuned out and they're not really interested in buying in. So how do you get through to a Manitoban who's not buying in at this point in the game? What can you say to a Manitoban who hasn't bought in yet? What can you say to them right now to get them on the same page?
Well, we've stepped up the advertising. We've done some focused outreach, electronic media for our young target audience. But let me be direct to the folks who participated in that rally on the weekend. You don't have to believe in COVID. You don't have to believe in COVID for it to be real. It's real. 100 yards away are people waiting in a parking lot to get treated in a hospital. Less than a third of a mile away from where you were rallying, there's people dying in a senior's home. COVID's real. COVID kills people. So you don't have to believe in COVID, but COVID believes in you, and COVID's going to find you if you're not careful. My message to you is COVID kills people. So we should be, all of us, and I want to be really clear on this, all of us have to be focused on bending the curve. And when I say bending the curve, and this is for you folks that were at that rally, when I say bending the curve, I mean down.
From the Brandon Sun, Drew.
Thank you. Mr. Premier, over the weekend, we obviously saw packed parking lots at some big box stores. So why is the province letting those big box stores like Walmart, Costco sell non-essential items while local businesses who also sell them are forced to close?
Fair question. The idea there was to make sure that people could get essential goods. I don't think it was so they could get non-essential goods. So I'm concerned about that, and I'm concerned about the I've asked Ralph Eichler to meet with some of our small business groups and representatives to have a discussion on this. I believe that's happening today. Because I think what we have to do here is make sure that we beat COVID. And we can't beat COVID if we're encouraging situations where there's a higher concentration of people and contacts are exponentially larger than they should be. And we're also very concerned about the element of fairness here. We're putting a lot of small businesses in a position where they're having to make major sacrifices. 100% shutdown is a major sacrifice. Trust me, I know. And the reality of this situation is that some are abusing this situation and for the danger of other people. Some are abusing it to gain business advantage. That's not a situation we can see maintained. So I have asked for some consultation to occur, and I think we'll have more to say on that in the next not too distant future.
So at this point, is the province considering limiting what the stores who can stay open can sell?
I won't prejudge the consultations, but clearly that would be one element that has to be looked at. I think that we've always endeavored in every one of our measures to consider the public view. And on this one, I think it's important to ask the business groups what they think. So we're going to be doing that. As I said, that's underway. And then we'll make necessary decisions around the advice we receive, known to you and to others in the not-too-distant future.
From the Winnipeg Sun, Josh.
Good afternoon, Mr. Premier. Just kind of following up on those questions. The mayor was even calling for tighter restrictions today on some of these measures. So by your comments, can we look at tighter restrictions, or could you respond to what the mayor was calling for earlier today?
We responded to what the mayor was calling for earlier today. A while ago, the discussions have been underway. The finalization of those recommendations is what I'm referring to when I talk about consultation with business. These discussions have been underway already. So that's I think I've already outlined the action that we're planning to take, and I appreciate the mayor raising the issue. It's an important issue, an issue of fairness for all small business. I'd encourage the city to take a look now that they're in surplus this year. I'd encourage them to take a look at maybe adding to our business supports like the ones we're announcing today. If they feel it's within their budgetary capabilities, they might like to consider adding some support for Winnipeg small businesses this year when it's needed.
Thank you for that. And I think there's some confusion for a lot of people when we look at the current community transmission going out there and being told to stay home and all the rest, yet the kids are still going to school. And there's teachers, there's staff there, all the rest. So it's not just kids that are impacted by that. Why haven't the schools been closed yet? Do you see that happening if these numbers continue to rise? Where are we on that?
Well, I don't think there's any medical expertise out there. The World Health Organization recommends against that. Dr. Roussin certainly does. I'm not aware of any provincial health authority that is recommending school closures. So no, I don't think that that's on the table. What needs to be on the table is additional supports. That's what we've put in the table for our schools, for frontline in particular. To the tune of well over $150 million of additional supports for schools. And so, we believe our children learn best in schools. We have made provision and are assisting those who cannot or choose not to have their children in schools. But no, I think the science is pretty clear on this. And I guess I would just say thanks to the teachers on the front line, because their confidence in dealing with this situation, their coolness under pressure, really means a lot to parents, and it means a lot to the children that are in their care as well. So I have tremendous respect for the teaching profession, and I just have to say, I think they show their value, teachers are showing their value to the people of this province and the families of this province in spades right now.
From CBC Manitoba, Ian.
Good afternoon, Premier. Ian Frey, CBC. I know you note that the small businesses, they will be those mom and pop shops who see the big box stores are packed, who see those stores selling their products. What do you say to those businesses?
Well, I think I made that clear earlier, Ian. We're going to have more to say on this in the not too distant future. I'd say probably in the next 2 or 3 days.
Okay. It's obvious, I guess, over the weeks that Manitobans have not been following the public health advice, even though hospitals are on the brink. We've seen Australia, they were in the same boat and they had achieved success with a really strict lockdown. Would Manitoba follow suit with a lockdown of its own?
Well, I don't know if you read the Globe and Mail. There's a medical columnist named Picard, who I have a lot of time for, wrote in Saturday's column, Manitoba's leading the way and has taken the most stringent measures to protect its people in the country. So I would just say to members of the media, we have, and we continue to. We maintained some of the most restrictive measures throughout the entire summer months, while others lifted theirs entirely. So outside of the Atlantic Canadian bubble in this country right now, we're seeing record highs in every jurisdiction, but Manitoba has brought in some of the most stringent measures, restrictive measures of any province outside, as I say, on the left of Nova Scotia in the country.
From the Canadian Press, Steve.
Premier, I want to go back to the Steinbach Rally. You've made your feelings clear, and you've said that there's some sort of enforcement coming, but the image that people have taken away is that from the weekend so far is that there was this big rally, 99% of the people didn't receive a ticket, and yet there are license plates very visible all around. It seems like it would be pretty easy to issue tickets, perhaps not at the moment, as you said, there was some verbal abuse going on, but is it not easy to issue tickets when license plates are all around you?
There won't be tickets issued as a consequence of exactly what you've just described. There most certainly will be.
So it will be a bit like it will be tickets emailed to the car owner if they were photographed there on site?
I'll let the police do their work. I'll simply say that the consequences of stupidity are going to be felt by the people who were there violating the rules, and they should look forward to and check their mailbox, waiting for a penalty to come in the mail to them, and then they can pay the bill.
From CTV News, Jeff.
Hi, Mr. Premier. In following Steve's questions, the province sent a letter to the Reeve the Armilla Brokery on Friday, warning him what could happen if he attended the rally. He did. I'm wondering if you're encouraging council members in the RM to look at sanctions against the Reeve. Is that something you want to see happen?
Well, the beauty of our local municipal system, like it or not, is that these folks are accountable to their electorate, but they also have other rules. And I am sure my municipal affairs minister will be notifying this individual of his obligation to abide by such rules. That being said, COVID, whether he believes in it or not, does exist, and the reality is it exists for him too. The problem that we have with people like the mayor is obvious, I think, to most thinking Manitobans. The threat that is posed by COVID isn't posed by COVID alone, it's posed by people who fail to abide by reasonable restrictions that will assist us in keeping the COVID transmission rates down. And when people do things like gather together in an attempt to protest the very restrictions that are necessary to keep COVID down. What they're saying is that they aren't accepting of personal responsibilities. We all have personal responsibilities. We have rights. We also have responsibilities. And I would say to the folks who were there's a book I have a lot of time for. And one of the things I always hold high in that book is a phrase. It says, "Thou shalt not kill." Maybe you could reflect on that a little bit when you consider about the dangers that COVID is posing to real Manitobans right now as a consequence of behavior like your own. Reflect on that if you would like.
Thank you for that. The second question is again in a similar vein to questions you've answered earlier, Mr. Premier. How do you feel when a lot of us are seeing full parking lots at a lot of these big stores, people not staying home, going shopping when we see cases rising, and of course hospitals at capacity?
Well, obviously I feel for any business that can't have a full parking lot. If the fact of the matter is a full parking lot isn't the problem. The problem is when people get out of their cars and gather too close together without masks and so on and so forth, and then create a greater likelihood of the transmission of COVID. We have rules, and we expect everybody to follow those rules. We've exempted essential services so people can get their groceries, their head of lettuce, but their head of lettuce shouldn't translate into a new stereo system or a pool table. The idea here is not to create an unfair disadvantage for all the small mom and pop stores in our province. The idea here is to make sure that folks can get the goods they need, the services they need to survive during this rotten time. And I would hope people that understand that they shouldn't be in business would understand that the ethics of this are that you don't try to take unfair advantage of other people. And you don't do it by creating an unsafe environment for people in your own operations. So there's two issues here. There's the gathering of people that has been alleged in improper formats inside the stores. That's one issue. But the other issue that has to be addressed is the issue of opening the door to people selling all kinds of goods and services in some big stores that they can't sell in smaller ones. That doesn't seem to me very fair. In fact, it seems to me kind of unfair. So while others are doing their part or forced to do their part, I would expect the big stores to do the same. So that's where I come from, and I admit a bias towards smaller businesses because I come from that. But I just think it's not fair, and I'm sure that the Retail Council, the Chambers of Commerce, when they're asked about this, are going to have concerns, and I'm interested in hearing what they are. But I am most assuredly interested in public safety first, and we're all of us on Team Manitoba. Not some of us, all of us.
Our final reporter this afternoon from CBC National, Cameron.
Hi, Premier. So just on that point that you've just made, when the current restrictions were written, was there not any anticipation that this might be what would happen, that it would unduly penalize or disadvantage smaller businesses that may only sell a certain type of thing or a small variety of things as opposed to, say, a big box store like a Walmart or a Canadian Tire?
Cameron, we had these restrictions all spring, and these were issues we didn't see a lot of abuse. So I think that's probably the problem now. We're seeing some advantage being taken. We're seeing, and I get that everybody in business is stressed right now, including the big box stores. But we're seeing the abuse now, and because of that, we're forced to act to counter that.
Lastly, understanding that, we're trying to manage the health and the economy here, but when you take a look at a situation like this, and now people are looking for any little advantage or loophole to stay open, keep cash flow going, that sort of thing. You've been out here for the last several months. You have asked nicely. You have pleaded at times. You have come out with a stern voice at times. And here we are once again talking about how people have worked around it or how people are taking advantage of it. How frustrated are you right now?
Less so than 2 weeks ago, Cam. Last week was a record number of fines. I think well over $50,000-$60,000 in fines just for businesses, let alone the individuals. I'll have more to say on the detail of additional fines tomorrow. I'm fine with fines. If that's what it takes, we've got to get it out there. Deterrents matter. And we've got people who, it seems, only will change their behaviors if they have to pay to change those behaviors. So we'll make them pay if they don't change their behaviors in this instance, and make sure that people understand that we all share a responsibility to protect one another, not some of us, all of us, and there'll be consequences for not doing that. So we've stepped up the enforcement. We have literally hundreds of other people that we didn't have a few weeks ago, able to go out and oversee and give fines and charges if necessary. We're equipping our rural municipalities and the City of Winnipeg to do more, and assisting them in training up and orienting their people to do more. And I'll have more to say again, as I've said a couple of times, tomorrow on additional measures. But frustrated a couple of weeks ago for sure, and I think I probably portrayed that rather clearly. But not frustrated. Don't mistake frustration for a lack of resolve. And we have the resolve to change things, and we're going to make sure that people who haven't got the message in the past will get the message in the future, one way or the other. Thanks, everybody.